Well, good morning again, degenerates. We're going back into it again. We've got another dev diary to do. Now, this video I've kind of been putting off a little bit because I'm not quite sure what to make of this dev diary. But you know what? We'll do a little breakdown. We'll go through it. Plus, I figured that I can only really put it off for so long. Eventually, I was going to come down to this and, well, what better time is there than now? I mean, it seems a little bit like the world's falling apart right now, so, gotta find something to enjoy, right? So let's just
jump into it.
What awaits players when they first land on Eternum is a new discovery of a new world.
When you first arrive on Eternum, you're going to be kind of at ground zero. Your ship has crashed. There's nobody around who's on your side. Pretty soon, you're going to start to meet other players, and you're going to start to understand that life on Eternum is very much a band together or die alone situation.
Alright, so the majority of what they said there is purely fluff, but there are some key points that are worth taking note of. So we know that we end up in a shipwreck, that we crash on an island. That tells us our starting point, as I discussed in the last dev diary. Another point that they've made here is that there's going to be a focus on the multiplayer. Once you crash, once you land, you're going to run into other players, and it's going to be very obvious that you have to either band together or die. The other part of this is they're just playing off of their picturesque, kind of very beautiful landscape thing, which I think it's going to be fairly impressive. From what they're saying here, I would be very disappointed from a player perspective if I open up this game, played it for the first time, and wasn't blown away by the visuals that they had. But nothing much to discuss there that we don't already know, really. So let's continue.
When we created Eternum, we wanted to design and create a vast, explorable world. Players will quickly realize that nothing ever really dies in this island. No soul can leave the body. It is the magical resource that grants the power of immortality, and it is called Azoth.
So there we go again. That gives us some ideas as to why things respawn, why things come back, why you might come back, which I like from a lore perspective because most MMOs don't go into any lore behind why you can keep on resurrecting, why you can keep coming back. And if they do, it kind of feels like it's just been slapped on at the end there. Like no thought was really put into it. They were just like, we need some kind of mechanic for things to keep coming back, so this is the explanation. And players have kind of conceded that this is how it has to be. Now this actually ties that into the lore. This actually makes it feel like a part of the world around it, which is a very nice addition, and I like that they did that. I just wish they chose another name aside from Azoth. So another quick point to hit on there is she talks about no soul being able to leave the body. Now that sounds a little bit like the Dark Sign, the curse from Dark Souls, where people were cursed to undeath, which is a very interesting concept within itself. Obviously it's been done before, but it lends more to the lore, it lends more to the story, and I'm a sucker for that. Look, if they're gonna add things to the story that makes sense and give us a logical progression, I'm all for that. And I hope they do it well. I hope they go in depth, and I hope there's some crazy shit to try and discover in this game when it comes just to the story.
One of the things that makes Eternum very dangerous is that there's a bunch of different factions there, and each one has their own objectives and desires, and they conflict with each other, but more importantly, they create big conflicts with the player and dangers for them.
So just a quick point to hit on there. We know there are 3 factions that are playable at least. We've got the Marauders, the Covenant, and the Syndicate. Now, from what he's saying, it seems like there are other factions out there that not just are PvP elements, but PvE elements as well. They may not be playable factions, but they seem to interact with the world in some way. This is a great idea. I mean, it's not always possible to join all factions in life, and plus, we need some kind of opposing force to work against. It might be that we end up banding together against enemy factions in order to defeat a greater PvE threat before we go back to chopping each other's heads off. I think that's good. That lends to the politics of the game. Will you help this guy who's of a different faction? Will you leave him to die? What worries me a bit is how much depth has been invested into these factions. If they are simply shallow and surface level factions, which I don't think they are, then they're in a bit of trouble because there's not that much to explore. Now, we do know a bit about a few of the non-playable factions. One of them is the Ancients and the other is the Corrupted, I believe. But I guess we'll find out more about that as this video goes on.
Alongside the Corrupted, there's 3 other major enemy groups that exist.
The Lost are the sort of soulless wretches of our game. They're people who have eternal life but have it without a soul. And as you learn, that is not a pleasant fate.
So again, this harkens back to Dark Souls again. This is kind of the idea of losing your will and going crazy and bonkers because, well, you're forced into this eternal life that you just can't stand anymore. From a purely philosophical standpoint, I don't think this is so much a copy of Dark Souls as it's an inspiration from. It seems like it's going to have its own unique kind of twist on things, which is good. This works all around the philosophical idea of no one gets to live forever and, well, keep their mind sane, and the idea of those who lose their soul are kind of already dead. They're just walking corpses. I hope we get to investigate more into this. I hope we get to find out why this keeps happening to a few people, because this doesn't seem like it's just this is your basic enemy, go kill 5 boars kind of quest. This seems like an actual faction of people who are just, you know, the shambling horde of the undead, which sounds like a good idea. I mean, tell me a game that doesn't find that concept fascinating to some degree.
Pleasant fate.
They're stuck in this sort of like half-death state because they've died in some horrific way, or sailors who have crash landed on this island and sort of washed ashore here.
They're the ghouls, the undead versions in our game.
So, like I said, this is their ghouls, this is the undead. Now, I'm interested to see specifically how intelligent are these things? Are they just your basic animalistic creature that attacks you out of nowhere? Do they have some kind of society or structure, something like, you know, hinted suggestions you see in something like a movie like I Am Legend? I'm hoping that they are more than just your wild, brutish, animal, undead zombie thing that wants to eat your brains, but I don't know from a lore perspective how they would even implement that into this game. So from what I'm seeing here, they might end up just being your shambling horrors that you go around killing until they're gone.
The Angry Earth is the pure, natural power of the island, fighting back against the people who have come to corrupt it. It's almost like the island's defense system, and it will do whatever it can to expel these invaders.
Nature is trying to imitate the form of humans or animals they see.
And some are like more humanoid, but there's other ones that are more of like a constructed monstrosity.
They mask themselves in order to fight back from what they consider is an infection.
Now this is fascinating to me. This I enjoy a lot because we have a historical premise here that's been used in, well, real life, because we kind of have a historical premise for these things being used. The whole idea of nature rising up to defend itself, the whole thing of nature being an immune system for the planet. I like that they've taken that idea and they've advanced it. What really fascinates me about the lore of New World is that the story isn't based on nothing. They've taken historical elements from real world cases and translated it into their game. It's not just a cookie cutter story that's made up out of nothing, which makes things harder for people to understand and harder for them to get into the lore behind the game. Now, World of Warcraft specifically could get away with this because they had spent all that time making Warcraft, Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3, which helped them build up a story to the point where they could release World of Warcraft and continue their story forward. New World, much like other MMOs, doesn't have that advantage. So they have to find other sneakier ways to get around that problem by relating the lore to things that we inherently understand due to our culture, due to our stories that we've passed on, and from the reality and history that humans have kind of experienced on this planet so far. Now again, same as the undead, this leaves me with the question of, if this is a faction, how intelligent are they? Is this just nature reacting to the way people behave? Or do they have their own central intelligence? Is it like a hive mind kind of system? Or is it more like just wild creatures that keep adapting and evolving and mimicking the things they see around them? What is interesting is, I just want to go back to this shot right here, is you'll notice that this tree creature is carrying a staff, a weapon of some kind. So it would appear that it might not just be some creature or wild animal that's mimicking the things it's seen. It might have its own intelligence. There might be a story behind why these things behave this way. Is it purely down to Azoth, or is there something inherently different about this faction? Why are they called a faction if they're just a bunch of shambling animals? There seems to be some kind of discrepancy there, maybe something that'll only be revealed once we start playing the game. Who knows? I just hope there's more to this than here's a group of enemies, they all look the same, therefore they're under the same faction, go kill them. I hope there's more to it than that, even with these factions that we can't play.
One of the civilizations that existed on Eternum were known as the Ancients, and they had harnessed the power of Azoth. For the Ancients, they used it to power their technologies, and you'll see tributes to their society throughout the world. Something happened to the Ancients, and no one knows quite what happened. The remains of their civilization are there, and their secrets are there for you to discover.
Now, personally, this is the one I am most fascinated in. I think there's a lot here behind this faction specifically, because you've got a long dead civilization. How did they end up dead? How did things end up collapsing like this? There's some very interesting things around the architecture that they've built into this game, like the split down everyone's faces. Let me just find it here. So looking at this scene here, you'll notice that every single one of their architectural structures has this weird split down the middle of their faces. And it seems to continue down into the chest. We saw this in the trailer as well with the big face that the Roman guy pulled the shiny rock off of. Why? What is the significance of that? There seems to be a lot of thought that they've put into this ancient civilization. It seems to link to ancient civilizations of the past that we understood historically, where there are certain things they did that we don't quite comprehend. Same things happening here. Another thing to notice about the statues in most of the gameplay footage that we've seen so far is that the ancients tend to have more than one set of arms. Now, the interesting thing about that is if we go over here, this skeleton is linked to the ancients trailer, but I don't see 4 arms on this guy. I see 2 arms. I see Skelly Boy here walking around. So what were these? Were human slaves to them? Were these undead creatures raised from the dead by the ancients? There's a lot here to explore. There's a lot here to discover. They can make this as deep as they want to, and they can continually add on to the lore of the ancients, going deeper and deeper into this thing as far as they need to go to make it fascinating. There are hidden treasures that you could put around this. There's so much here. This kind of gives me a little bit of those Indiana Jones vibes, where there's just so much to explore and discover. This part of the game, I'll be honest with you, this was one of the first dev diaries I saw, and well, this one gave me a little bit of a chub when it got to the Ancients part here, because, well, it looks pretty damn good. This is what got me hooked on the story of this game and made me want to find out as much as possible.
In Eternum, the world fights back through the corrupted. So the corrupted notice the player, they notice them getting stronger and building up their settlements, and then they fight back. They might blockade a road, have a summoning portal, which portals lots of enemies of their type into the player's area.
Now here again we see something very interesting. He talks about portals specifically, and he talks about the corrupted using those portals, blockading roads, invading our city. So now we know how they're going to attack our settlements. We know how they get there. They don't just wander down a road to find us. They actually portal in, which might mean that they have some level of intelligence or some central body that's controlling their movements. Not only that, but this might lend to the idea that we can use their portals against them. Maybe as players, we get to use the portals ourselves once we take them over. Maybe this is a future mechanic that they can use for dungeons and raids and instancing. I guess we'll see, but there is a lot to play with here. They've kind of just dropped this ball of Play-Doh in the middle of the game and said, go for it. And you know what? Later they might mold it into something really incredible. I like that they've left a few things open-ended so that they've given themselves space to grow instead of trying to tack things on to the end of stuff and have no development to go forward. Mists of Pandaria. Geez, I don't know. God, I don't know where that came from. Must have had something stuck in my throat. But let's continue.
You can take one of the territories on Eternum. You can ultimately grow your town to the point where not only the monsters in the woods want to take it from you, but other players as well. And when we have these massive wars over these territories, it's pretty special.
Now, as a last note here, this right here is what actually gets my dick hard. So as I spoke about before, the factions previously are interesting and fascinating. There's a lot to explore there. There's a lot to discover. There's a lot of open-ended threads there that Amazon themselves can continue to explore, can continue to build upon to make this game even better as time goes on. But this right here, this combat right here, let's just go back. Let's just, yeah, look at that. Gotta be banned off of YouTube for playing porn like this. Look at that. Now that right there is the interesting part to me. That right there is what this game is supposed to be about. Now, as I've said in other videos, I'm kind of still salty about the whole toggle on, toggle off PvP system. But hey, look, if the PvP is anything close to even that, I'm gonna be a happy boy murdering people or getting murdered by people. But that's the end of the video. Not that much to discover in this one, not that much to comment on. A lot lore-wise that can be dug into deeper once the game's released. This just gives us a little bit of a taste of the story cake that we get into. And of course, again, at the end there, they just give you that little teaser, that little drop of the panties there when it comes to the PvP. And God, am I excited for this game. I really want it to be good. I really have my hopes up. I hope we don't get No Man's Sky. Then again, No Man's Sky is pretty good right now compared to what it was on launch. But I'm hoping for and expecting a good game from Amazon Game Studios. I think they've thought this out very well. I think they've planned this very carefully. They've got the money to build a good story, to hire the right people to make this right. And I think that this game can have a lot of longevity depending on its financial model. Now, I am interested to see how they monetize this game over a long period of time, because as far as we've been told, this game is buy and play. It's not subscription model. So I'm hoping that they have a way to monetize this game long term, to keep motivation to keep developing this game without having to resort to forcing players into corners where they're buying gear in order to succeed or get an advantage over others, because that will sink this game through the floor. And I will tell everyone I can to not buy this goddamn game if they do that. But that has been a quick look at another one of the developer diaries, Fight the World. I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope you have a great day. I hope everything goes your way, but it's time now for you and I to bugger off. Cheers for now.